Good night, Mr. Murray.
Good night, Marcia. Good night. Quite, as usual, quite an interesting show so far. I hope
Yes,
to I hope to add to that quality as we go along.
yes, sir. And I can see you all dressed up very
Yes.
tonight, man. Woo.
You like it? You like it?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, they who is it? It's a wardrobe coordinator. Is
No,
that what you
no, no,
call her?
no. Manager, please.
The
Manager,
ward,
please.
the wardrobe manager.
Right, that's right.
Let her
I
know you're looking lovely.
thank you. I think if she's coordinated, she'll have to get less pay or less benefits than the manager. So I have to give her management title and status. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Good
sir.
to be
Yes,
here.
yes. So go right ahead. I know Dave has your so you're dealing with by-election more than
Yes,
just filling a seat. And it's
yes,
not coming up anymore. It's actually here. And Dave is going to
yeah.
put your in the meantime, guys, can you please share? Everybody go ahead and
Good.
share and like and share and like and share. Important that we do that. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, go
Yeah.
right ahead. It's coming up. The
As
slide is coming up.
yeah, as I'll start by first of all thanking and commending Mrs. Rose Corbin for her presentation earlier this week dealing with by-elections. I thought she gave a very solid, official, academic uh, presentation on what is to the forward of the law, etc. But I'm going to do a bit more than that this time. I'm going to give you some insights into some of the techniques behind by-elections, because elections are generally now almost a science. It is done with much expertise and study and consideration of theories and concepts and practice, etc. And so it's not done by chance. And therefore, I want to say that first of all, I want to say that the first slide. For by elections by themselves, like I said, as the title said, more than just filling a seat, it has wider implications. Or one of these, which are not always immediately obvious to persons, is that while technically and legally it's filling a seat in a particular constituency, the debate, the narrative can and should involve the whole country. In other words, it becomes a kind of mini referendum on the government rather than focusing just on the issues from within that particular constituency. Good politicians always use the occasion to pass judgments on the performance of the government all over, and therefore force them to deal with it in a focused, concentrated way, so that it can be discussed and usually it has an impact on that particular constituency. Now, like by elections in some other countries are called a bipole or a special election, but they mean the same thing. So therefore, I hope, having said, I hope to hear that. I fully expect that in this coming by election in St. James North, that the same opportunity be used to deal with some of the issues, not only in St. James North, but in St. James, in St. Peter, in the north of Barbados, in the west of Barbados, and because it'll be an opportunity to see if you get some answers, some information, some guidance, some explanations which we have not had for more than a year on some of these matters. So I think the government feet should be held to the fair river possible and force them to give just information on the issue. Part of the political implications too is that the by-election can take on such a focus that people can lose sight of what's really happening in the country. And because it is so difficult to control the narrative of the by-election, persons are people take it in very, very great care in choosing the date and time and place when because they know the whole thing can come unfurled, ripped apart by events. And the thing about a by-election, because of the concentrated attention, anything happening in the rest of society can impact on it. So, for example, like in St. Peter, 1984, by-election was called, but a flood came and that impacted on it. So you things that you can't control. I give a story about that. I also give you a story about even how people behave or what they say on the platform can have an impact on the by-election. So these issues, therefore, should be discussed and ventilated and examined closely. And therefore, there is also there's also the referendum is like I said, a general vote by the electorate on a single political question that has been referred to them for a direct decision. And I'd like to know that, as far as I can discover, we have never had a referendum in Barbados. Never. I remember Prime Minister Arthur was contemplating one at one time.
Really?
Yeah, for to go with a republic. We had said we spent time trying to. Even you have to be very careful even of the wording of the question.
Yes.
So
could I say something to the viewers? Victorious lady, thank you for recognizing that it's decreasing. When that happens is that we have a lot of people who are reporting the site, and that's why I noticed the numbers are low. So a lot of people are reporting, so you must go ahead and because it's dropping. The likes are decreasing. That's what's going on. It happens all the time. Yes, continue, Mr. Murray.
So therefore, a government would look for what they see as the perfect time to bring this by election. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will take her time, very careful time, to try to choose May the 21st for various reasons that day, because it thinks all the stars are aligned, everything is in order, and that should enhance their chances of winning the by-election. And so that's the way it's used very, very, and timing is very important in human affairs. And therefore, what happens also is one of the, if you look at slide, if you have the slide, the advantage of incumbency. One of the benefits of a government calling a by-election is it has access to patronage, resources, what is called the advantage of incumbency. Incumbency being you are in office, and therefore this is a legal undertaking as a by-election, and therefore you have legal access to government benefits, resources. If a pipe bursts, if there's a bad road, you can fill the potholes, etc. You can try to tidy it to make it as perfect and clean and ready for that occasion. As a matter of fact, I remember in the city, I have a very lasting memory for the city by election in 1976, when there was the night before the election at 6 o'clock. The then government was still paving the streets down in New Orleans. I was working at the African. They called me over. I saw the hot Barbara Green. His steam coming up at 6 o'clock. It's dark, but they wanted the gift, so they go to all the kind of extremes to make sure that they get full benefit and full benefit from it. So you can award jobs, award contracts. You do everything to sweetly push the pot. They give the best. Of course, it is commonplace in that regard, and what makes it so noticeable is that the opposition, whoever they are not in an equal position to compete with that. So that is one of the reasons why they think that that will make their things better for them. So okay, I'm going to give you some. I want to give you some. I cite census and by-elections. For example, one of the earliest by-elections I can recall, if you do your search, in 1958 in St. John. I'm making use of that example. Now, by-elections are meant to fill a seat, but again, it's more than. It can also create notable personalities in politics. Now, Albar would run for the by-election in St. John in 1958 because one of the then sitting members, Mr. Victor Vaughan, had won a seat in the federal elections to go to federal parliament, but that seat became vacant. And what is also interesting, Mr. Barr himself had competed in the federal by-election, but did not. There were 5 seats being chosen. He did not make the list. But then here comes a by-election, and he was on he competed. Not only did he not get a seat in the 58th Parliament, in the 56th Parliament, he tried, and he didn't get the by-election. He had lost, he won a seat in St. George in 1951, lost in 1956 when he and Adams fell out, and Adams was still at his prime then before he went off to the federal parliament. So Mr. Barr lost his seat, but came back in 58, won the by-election in St. John, and never looked back. Another early by-election would have been of note would have been the St. Philip North by-election in February 1976. That was occasioned by the bankruptcy of Mr. Martin Neville Maxwell. He was the Speaker of the House. He was found guilty of defamation and had time to pay, did not pay. And then the government of there was stalling and stalling. Sometimes the House would not meet for weeks because they were trying to give him as much time to stretch it out as long as possible before you call the by-election. Finally, they ran out of time, and they were forced to call that by-election in 1976. And that was won by David Simmons. And up to then, St. Philip North was a DLP stronghold. It was won by Mr. David Simmons. And then in May 1976, they had another by-election in the city that was won by Miss Billy Miller. So these two by-elections were being seen as a gauge of the popularity and the standing of the government because of the two by-elections coming in quick succession. And you have to see that in the context of, we're just going 1974, where we had the oil crisis, goods were scarce, lots of things were put under price controls, and you couldn't get things with scarcity. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of dissatisfaction. In 1974, also, Mr. Barr had a big fall, with almost the rest of society, when he had made a series of proposed changes to the Constitution, and he incurred the wrath of the church, the judiciary, the teachers, almost everybody. So all these issues were bubbling, and I think I have to muddle. I remember it well because I remember writing that. The way things were going. I used to write a political column for the Advocate then, and I said that Mr. Barr could and should not be returned because of the whole. I mean, I can imagine what happened to me after that. Oh Lord, talk about cursing. Because I dare say, because I was reading the tea leaves, I examined issues, and it was clear that there had been a massive shift in the society over the election. Now, in July 1978, there was one in. So Miss Billy Miller won the by-election in the city in '76. Was run in the general election. Then she became the first female minister in Barbados. So she had, and then she became deputy prime minister, etc., etc. So she could be considered being a notable figure coming out of a by-election in May 1986. No, sorry, there was one. Sorry, there was one in '78. So Michael South Central in July 1978. It was one when Mr. Frederick Smith resigned retired and lead the opposition for the DLP, and there was a by-election out of which came Dr. Richie Haynes. Now this is the same Dr. Richie Haynes who had failed to be elected when he ran in his hometown in St. George in the general election of '76, but he came back in '78, won the by-election. Went that by-election, went into the House, became a minister of finance eventually, and then he formed the NDP, and then ran and won the seat retained the seat in St. Michael South Central. But what was noticeable was that Mr. Frederick Smith had lost his seat in the '76 election, had won the seat, but only by 25 votes. And he felt that was not good enough for a man who had done so much for Barbados, who had been its first Attorney General after independence, who had been Minister of Education, etc. He felt that was unbecoming of him. He retired. He retired at that stage. And then Miss Dr. Haynes, who was a young, handsome, dashing doctor, well-known Barbados scholar, right, who had been rejected by his own people in St. George. One seat easily in St. Michael, South Central. One of the factors in that issue was that here was a doctor running for the DLP against a mortician, an undertaker, Mr. Chari. Mr. Chari said, so the contrast was so people said, right, one is off me, someone who could save me, and then the one who only bury me. So I go, so those kind of interpretations of quite anything. So had to fashion, had to help alone, help to fashion, had to make doctrines even more attractive than Mr. Hines. And then came the 1984 July by-election in St. Peter, right? Which would come as by the retirement of Mr. Burton Hines, who's the great grandfather of Chad Blackman, who's now running in St. James North. And the BLP ran Mr. Owen Arthur, and the DLP ran Mrs. Sybil Leacock, right?
Yes.
Right. And that election was influenced by the floods, where people got their houses washed away, the houses damaged, and there was a lot of damage in St. Peter, right? Coincided with the by-election, virtually. And I remember Mr. Arthur appointed a minister of. Here comes the advantage of incumbency. He appointed Mr. Aaron Truss, the minister of flood relief, I think it was called, and his sole duty was to manage that whole process. And then the government had access to the old Haywoods Hotel was opening then, and those who didn't have anywhere to stay were housed in Haywoods because you're trying to make the electorate as comfortable as possible. But that election was lost by one vote by Mr. Arthur. In fact, in other words, Mrs. Leacock got one more vote than Mr. Arthur. And one more vote, and it showed you the importance of everybody voting, right? But Mr. Prime Minister Adams was not. There were lots of irregularity. There were some questionable decisions. There were disputes over votes, etc. Which votes were allowed in and which were prohibited. And Mr. Adams, who had described Mr. Owen Arthur as having one of the finest brains of the 20th century, right? And that's another story in itself. So he felt he could not let this quality person be lost in the electorate of Barbados. So he challenged it against some of more timid souls in the party. And he was convinced that he had a case. It went to the court. The whole process was examined. The votes were examined. The votes that had been disputed were there. Because when after the election, the votes are stored for a number of years.
Yes.
So they were able to go and pick out the actual votes that were disputed. And the court ruled that they should be annulled. The election should be annulled. They had another election by-election in November.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was run again, and that's why Mr. Arthur won much more handsomely. So, and then the after that in May 1985 was another by-election in St. Thomas caused by the death of Prime Minister Adams. Mr. David Simmons from St. Philip North, who had run the by-election in early 76 in St. Philip, won the general election in September 76, but came 1981, he lost in St. Philip North. So he was switched to St. Thomas in that by-election, and he won the election against Mr. Junior Rock. And one of the issues of the DLP, one of the issues of that, and I'm going to give you an instance now where, or in the St. Philip North by-election, there people have you have to, like I was talking about, things you have no control. You can't control exactly what everybody says on the platform. You hope that they make sense or they're doing anything embarrassing. In St. Philip North, one of the speakers, there was a proposal for the BLP to have a college in St. Philip North, right? And one of the speakers on the DLP staff, I wouldn't embarrass him or his legacy by calling his name, but people would know. He said, who you gonna put in that village idiots?
Repeat what he said.
Are you gonna put village idiots in that college? No, the meeting was being held in Church Village, Christchurch, St. Philip. He spoke about village idiots, and people twisted that to say he's calling the people in Church Village idiots. And quite interestingly, this same character spoke in the by-election in the city thereafter, right? And they were talking about something, and then made a remark that people said they were calling people city monkeys. So yeah, but you have to react to these things because it changed the narrative. It becomes very personal. I remember in 1985 in the by-election at a meeting in St. Thomas at Bridgefield, Mr. Barr put a tongue lashing in the BLP supporters. It came out of the blue. He said you could always tell, I can remember almost word for it, you could always tell a BLP supporter, say a BLP man, he's walked with an old policeman trousers with a tie wrap on your waist, two slips top on your feet, hair and comb, and people felt that attack on the BLPites helped to sort turn off people that made an easier passage for David Sims against Julia Rock. That would have been a closer contest had that not been set up that stage, and that had to change the whole direction and tone and narrative of the by-election. Then there was one in 1996, in May 1996 in St. Michael Northwest, where Mr. Lawson Weeks, a long-established member of the DLP and a long-standing parliamentarian, a professional pharmacist, had retired. And the DLP ran Mark Williams, and the DLP ran Clyde Maskell in 1996. Clyde Maskell won in that by-election. I think he was beaten again by Mr. Williams in the general election of 1999. But what is most striking of that by-election is it was not the debate of such. It was that I remember it was proposed by the now Prime Minister. She was then Minister of Education. She insisted that you had to hold a concert for young people, music again. She pressed Prime Minister Arthur for days and days until finally he related. He said, "Okay, let's have the concert." And it was down, where Bar Vent is now on the highway. That was the site. That was the site of the thing. And the only thing, the most memorable and notable thing that came out of that thing was that there was a scuffle and a young man got stabbed to death.
Really?
Yeah, yes, that's right. And from then on, I'm yet to be convinced that music changed people's minds in voting. Not in that way, just for a concert. You might have a campaign song which can influence you, but just to have a concert for young people could make a difference. And that was reinforced when we had a concert too in 2013, before the last election Mr. Arthur ran was called, before it was officially launched. Miss Morley insisted again for there be a concert, there be a meeting before the launch, which is very unusual. Called launch was supposed to be the first meeting,
right?
But just targeted at young people, and lots of entertainment at Haggard Hall. I remember the stage was facing the Sky Mall, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And to the left of the stage was a series of about 10 or 12 tents. And that tent was supposed to house, note carefully, the leaders of the gangs in St. Michael. All right. Those tents were supposed to occupy.
Who designated that the tents were to hold the leaders of the gangs?
I remember, that was the decision by the person who organized the meeting, Miss Smarty. I remember because she was the campaign in St. Michael, and St. Michael is key to the winner of a general election. If you lose St. Michael, you lose the rest of the country. So she had a responsibility, and she had a team. So Mike of St. Michael, which had about 10, 11 seats, I think, right? And they were supposed to bring home St. Michael. Her argument was that this concert, I remember Mr. Arch said I would only pay for it. I only agree to it if you have raised sponsorship for it. And she insisted she had, but I understand all the bills still haven't been paid for. Maybe no for that thing. But the point, she had these. So she was supposed to be in control of the gangs in St. Michael, right?
So she.
I remember this because she said, "I will have them under." She said, "I have them under control." I said, "But okay." I remember the question. You might think or know that you believe you have them under control. Can you keep them in control for the rest of the election? And she can answer. And as fate would have, we did not win St. Michael. We lost the election by 2 seats, by 14 to 16. So this catering to the gangs and people on the block had been a fascination for some people for a long time, but it did not work out then. So I say that just to give you a context of some of the intricacies that occur in by-elections. Again, that you can't always be sure of the outcome, and therefore you have to. It calls for careful management and organization because it's an intense activity in a short period of time. And lots of money, if you have it, is pumped in it. So it's a very high octane activity, and I think therefore, like I said earlier, the country, the opposition, if they should hold the government feet to the fire. To make sure that the issues are addressed in a full way. I'll tell you why. Because I've heard some of the things I've heard already from Mr. Packman. Even before the election was declared, I know for sure there was a meeting at Airport where they decided they had to fix all the irritants and controversy in the constituency before you have the elections. So you clean up everything, you dress up everything, you find reasons to make people think of you positively. So that is the kind of wicked. And then again, there's also the access to all the patronage and the resource of government to follow through in the campaign. That happens to every government. It's available to every. I'm not picking it out. This happens to every government. The law allows that because of the advantage of the advantage of incumbency. They are able to use that. So, but by elections are a standard feature of Barbadian life. I think most of them, apart from the one in St. Michael Northwest in 1996, I can't remember any violence. Sometimes get a scuffle, but it's
the year that you had when the person was stabbed. Which year was that?
1996. 1996. Yeah, May 1990.
But that was a general election, right?
No, sorry, that was December. No, December 1996. December 1996. Sorry, December 1996 is when.
Okay.
That was the one that was won by Clyde Masker, who and then he lost in 1991. Right, so and they can be very colorful, but the election go in because of the narrative and the speakers, the qualities. You can go in any direction. You get good speakers, you get a good laugh, you get farcical things, but it can be a very interesting and rewarding exercise in the political atmosphere. But we usually have very quiet, well-run, decent, lack of violence in by-election, even though all the pressure and the thing is so intense. The Barbadian tradition in that regard remains that way. I hope we maintain it in St. James North. And I also hope that we have a very quiet atmosphere, that people be encouraged to want to leave their home, to travel long distances back and forth to meetings, and that they are not so haunted by crime that they're not willing to to leave their houses.
Yeah, that's the thing, so just hoping that people will still be able to go to exercise their right, their voting right. But I mean, there's a lot of things I learned. So that 1996, there was somebody who was stabbed in that one. And then just to hear that, how based on your account, how the you know how she really really loved to use music.
Oh yeah, oh
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, she's
I can.
always loved to use music, hence the big event on Heroes Day, and bringing in all these people.
It was about yeah. As one who was in the cabinet for the original Heroes Day in 1998, and yeah, the now Prime Minister was then Minister of Education and Culture, so she was basically technically in charge of it. Uh, it had none of the semblance of this. Nobody in drafting, in organizing, in conceptualizing. It never was meant to become just another bank holiday for wine or waka or fact. It was never meant. I remember after a while, the problem is that nobody has sat down and constantly tried to work a program that will help to make these heroes part of the lives of Barbie. There was a time when you'd have the pictures up around the Treasury building, but that was for limited time because the artists only give a limited exposure to protect their image, their rights to the image, etc. But there was music being played on the radios. Each of the heroes has a song composed
For
and
them.
recorded for him. But the one that's
Oh,
not here, each one has one. But there's not that build up. And you know how the Americans in their movies and shows they make reference to persons as part of the dialogue to reinforce the history and the culture.
correct. Yeah.
Cats, we don't do that. And by
Yeah.
now, I used to argue, which after I saw that we becoming just another by just like El Barde, I felt that the country could be divided in sections, and the schools we could each year you could produce a different. With the videos you have now, you should be able to do a video on each hero, all
Hmm.
11, so you can show it before heroes there. People have a different
Right.
appreciation for a person who made such great sacrifices and done so much for Barbados. But that,
Right.
yeah, it has just degenerated and dissolved into bacchanalia, fight. And this is crazy. I think we should try to, if we try to pull it back, some of the benefits of that might help to refashion the mind and thinking of young Barbadians, and they have some persons that can not just Vibes character and Beanie Man, they have alternatives, their own people that they can
Yes.
look
Oh,
at
yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the quality of their work and contributions to Barbados.